It was an ordinary afternoon when the unthinkable happened. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the park where Sarah and her twin children, Mia and Max, were playing. The park was lively, with children running around, laughing, and families enjoying the day. Sarah sat on a bench nearby, watching them with a content smile on her face. She had always loved seeing her kids so happy, so carefree. Everything felt normal. Just another peaceful afternoon. But that calmness would soon shatter. Sarah had taken her eyes off Mia and Max for just a moment. 1 second, they were running around, their laughter filling the air. And the next, they were gone. The moment Sarah realized they weren't there anymore, panic set in. She stood up quickly, scanning the park for them. She called their names, her voice rising in desperation. But the usual sounds of children playing and people chatting seemed to drown out her frantic calls. It felt like time had stopped. A wave of dread washed over her as she hurriedly walked towards the playground, hoping to find them playing by the swings or climbing on the jungle gym. But there was nothing. No sign of Mia and Max. She began to search the entire park, moving faster now, her heart pounding in her chest. Her mind raced with questions. Where could they have gone? Did they wander off, or was something else wrong? A few people stopped to help when they saw the distress on her face. They helped her call out, checked the nearby bushes, and even asked if anyone had seen the twins. But it was as if the children had vanished into thin air. No one knew anything, and Sarah's anxiety only grew. By the time the police arrived, the park had emptied, and the sun had begun to set. It felt like a cruel joke. How could just a few minutes change everything so drastically? The officers took Sarah's statement, their faces a mix of sympathy and concern. But even their professionalism couldn't ease her fears. They promised to do everything they could to find her children, but Sarah could see the uncertainty in their eyes. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no word on Mia and Max. The hope Sarah had initially felt began to fade with each passing day. The flyers she posted around town, the calls to every local shelter, the visits to every hospital, they all led to dead ends. The police investigation seemed to stall, and soon it felt like everyone, even the officers, had given up. Sarah couldn't understand it. She had raised Mia and Max with so much love. They were good kids, bright, friendly, and always looking out for one another. How could they just disappear without a trace? The questions haunted her at night, keeping her up as she wondered if they were safe, if they were still out there somewhere. But there was nothing. No answers, no clues, only an empty, aching void where her children should have been. As weeks went by, Sarah began to lose hope. Every day felt like a reminder of what she had lost. The world seemed to keep turning. But Sarah felt as though she was stuck in an endless loop of grief, unable to move forward. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself trapped in a world of grief and confusion. Every corner of her home felt empty, every room a reminder of what had been lost. Maya and Max had always filled the house with their laughter, their energy, their little footsteps running from one room to another. But now the silence was deafening. It was as though the house itself was mourning with her. Her friends and family tried to comfort her, but their words, though kind, felt hollow. They told her to stay strong, to have faith, but how could she when every day brought no news? Each time her phone rang, her heart skipped a beat, only to be disappointed when it was a wrong number or a call from someone offering their sympathy, but no answers. Sarah couldn't help but feel like the world was moving on without her, while she was stuck in this unrelenting grief. At night, when the house was quiet, Sarah's thoughts were her only company. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where Mia and Max were. Were they scared? Were they hurt? Had they been taken far away? The questions repeated in her mind, over and over, like an endless loop. She couldn't escape them, no matter how hard she tried. Sometimes she would close her eyes and picture them. Mia's bright blue eyes and blonde curls, always bouncing with energy. And Max's mischievous grin, always making her laugh with his silly jokes. Sarah clung to these memories, but as the days stretched on, it became harder and harder to hold on to the images of their faces. The hope she had once felt began to fade, and a deep, hollow sadness crept in its place. She tried to keep herself busy, cleaning the house, running errands, trying to act normal when people checked in on her. But it wasn't the same. Nothing felt normal anymore. Sarah began to withdraw from those around her. She felt like an outsider in her own life. Every time someone asked her how she was doing, it was like a sharp reminder that everything had changed. She would force a smile, say she was doing okay. But inside, she felt like she was drowning. The worst moments were the quiet ones, when she had no distractions, no one to talk to. She would sit in the living room, staring at the pictures of Mia and Max on the wall, and feel an overwhelming sense of emptiness. It was as if she was missing part of herself, and she didn't know how to get it back. Sometimes, Sarah found herself walking aimlessly through the neighborhood, hoping to catch a glimpse of her children. She'd go to the park where they had disappeared, but it never felt the same. The swings creaked in the wind, and the slides were empty. It was as if the park itself had lost its joy, just like she had. She would stand there for a while, staring at the spot where they had last been, but all she could feel was the weight of her own helplessness. Days turned into weeks, and each new day felt like another struggle to survive the pain. Sarah knew she had to keep going for her children, but the longer they stayed missing, the harder it became to believe they would ever come back. The world outside seemed to keep turning, but for Sarah, it had stopped. One day, as Sarah walked through the town center, her mind was clouded with worry and exhaustion. It had been 6 long weeks since Mia and Max disappeared, and despite her best efforts, there were still no answers. The days felt like they dragged on, each one heavier than the last. She had spent every waking moment trying to figure out what had happened to her children. But with no clues, no new leads, the pain of not knowing was starting to feel unbearable. Sarah didn't know where she was going that afternoon. She simply walked. It was as though her feet were carrying her while her mind stayed lost in thoughts of her missing children. The streets were busy with shoppers, people rushing to and from their errands, their voices blending into the background noise. But Sarah barely noticed. She was too focused on the weight in her chest, the knot in her stomach that never seemed to ease. That was when she saw the woman. Sitting on the cold concrete near a bench, a homeless woman wrapped in layers of old clothes, her face weathered and tired. She was staring at the ground, her hands folded neatly in her lap. There was nothing particularly remarkable about the woman, yet something in the way she sat there caught Sarah's attention. It was as if there was a strange energy surrounding her. Without thinking, Sarah found herself walking over to the woman. Maybe it was because she felt so lost, so desperate for any kind of direction, or maybe it was because she felt drawn to this woman, who seemed so out of place yet so calm. As Sarah approached, the woman's eyes slowly lifted, meeting Sarah's gaze. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, an unspoken connection forming between them. "Are you okay, dear?" the homeless woman asked softly, her voice gentle but raspy. Her eyes, though tired, held a knowing depth that seemed to pierce through Sarah's pain. Sarah hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She didn't want to burden this stranger with her pain. She didn't want to admit how much she was struggling, how hopeless she felt. But the words spilled out before she could stop them. "I'm looking for my kids. They've been missing for weeks." The woman didn't say anything for a long moment. She simply nodded, as if she understood. There was something about her calm demeanor that made Sarah feel like she wasn't being judged, like she wasn't alone in her grief. "Check the bathroom at KFC," the homeless woman said suddenly, her voice low, almost as if she was sharing a secret. Her eyes seemed to sparkle with a strange certainty. "You'll find them there." Sarah blinked, taken aback by the oddness of the suggestion. What did this woman mean? KFC. Of all the places, why there? She stared at the woman, unsure of whether she was being serious or if this was just some rambling from someone who had lost touch with reality. The homeless woman didn't explain any further. She simply looked back down at the ground, her hands still folded calmly in her lap. It was as though she had said all she needed to say. For a moment, Sarah stood frozen, unsure of what to make of the encounter. Was this some kind of bizarre coincidence, or was it fate, guiding her towards something she hadn't yet understood? Confused but intrigued, Sarah stood there for a moment, staring at the woman. The KFC bathroom. Could it really be that simple? Was it possible that this stranger had some kind of knowledge she hadn't shared with anyone else? Against her better judgment, Sarah decided to take the woman's advice. She felt a strange pull to act on it, even though it seemed far-fetched. As she turned to leave, she glanced back one last time, but the homeless woman had already lowered her head, as though she had never spoken to Sarah at all. The encounter left Sarah with more questions than answers, but for the first time in weeks, a small spark of hope flickered within her. Maybe, just maybe, this was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. As Sarah walked away from the homeless woman, she couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled in her chest. The woman's words echoed in her mind, but they didn't make sense. KFC. Why would her children be there? It seemed so out of place, so disconnected from everything else she had been doing in her search. Sarah had followed every lead, talked to every possible person, and still, nothing. Why would this woman, this stranger, suddenly suggest something so bizarre? With each step Sarah took toward the KFC, the doubt began to grow. She knew she should be grateful for any new lead, but her mind kept questioning everything. What if it was just a coincidence? What if she was chasing after something that wasn't real? Her hope had been crushed so many times before that the thought of getting excited about another dead end made her feel foolish. She turned a corner and saw the KFC in the distance. It looked so ordinary, a fast food restaurant like any other. The smell of fried chicken wafted through the air, and people were sitting in the small outdoor seating area, enjoying their meals. Sarah couldn't help but feel out of place. She wasn't here for food. She wasn't here for anything ordinary. She was here, following the advice of a stranger who had made a strange suggestion. What was she doing? Her feet carried her closer to the entrance, but with each step, the nagging doubt inside her grew stronger. Should she turn back? Should she stop wasting her time? The idea of finding her children in a KFC bathroom felt almost laughable. But then, just as quickly, a small voice inside her whispered that it was worth checking. She had to try. What if this was the one thing that could finally bring her some answers? What if, against all odds, this was real? When Sarah stepped into the restaurant, the sound of the busy kitchen and the chatter of people eating seemed to fade. She was focused, only thinking of the bathroom, wondering if what the woman had said was somehow true. She moved quickly to the back of the restaurant, her heart beating faster with every step. As she approached the bathroom door, her anxiety rose. What would she find in there? Nothing. Something strange. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but she was determined to check. She reached for the handle and paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. The doubt still lingered, but there was no turning back now. With a slight hesitation, Sarah pushed the door open. At first, everything seemed normal. The bathroom was small and clean, just like any other public restroom. The walls were lined with mirrors, the tiles gleaming under the fluorescent lights. But there was nothing unusual, no sign of her children, no message, nothing to explain the bizarre advice she had been given. For a moment, Sarah stood there, feeling a wave of disappointment. It was just as she had feared. She had followed a strange lead for nothing. She almost turned around to leave when something caught her eye. There, in the corner of the bathroom, was a small, forgotten bag, a little stuffed animal poking out from inside it. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was a toy she recognized. It was one of Mia's favorite stuffed animals. How could it be here? Her heart pounded as she slowly approached the bag, her hands trembling. Could it be a sign? Was this a clue from the twins? For the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope surged within Sarah. The strange advice had led her here, and now this little toy might be the first real sign she had gotten in weeks. As Sarah stood there in the bathroom, her heart racing, she could hardly believe what she was seeing. The stuffed animal, a small teddy bear with a little red bow, was undeniably Mia's. The toy had been with her since she was a baby. It had always been a source of comfort for her during difficult times, something she couldn't sleep without. Sarah's hands shook as she reached down to pick it up. It felt real, solid, familiar, but still, her mind struggled to make sense of it. Why was it here? What did it mean? Had Mia and Max really been here, in this very place? The thought filled her with both hope and confusion. She carefully opened the small bag the toy had been tucked into, her fingers trembling. Inside, she found more than just the teddy bear. There was a crumpled piece of paper, barely visible, with something written on it. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she unfolded the note. The handwriting was messy, almost hurried, but it was unmistakable. It was a message that seemed to be from her children. "We're okay, Mommy," the note read. "We're waiting for you." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she read the words over and over again. "We're waiting for you." It was like a lifeline, a small beacon of hope in the middle of her darkest days. The note wasn't much, but it was everything. For 6 weeks, she had felt as if she were lost, drowning in uncertainty. But now, for the first time, she had something concrete to hold on to. Her children were alive. They were waiting for her. But the message only brought more questions. Where were they? How had they gotten here? And why had they left the note in this random KFC bathroom? There were so many unanswered questions, but one thing was certain. Her children were still out there. The possibility that they were alive, that she could find them, was enough to make Sarah feel like she could breathe again. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could they be in danger? Had someone taken them, and now they were trying to leave her a clue? Or was it something else entirely? Despite the questions swirling in her head, one thing was clear. This was a lead. This note, this teddy bear, was a sign. She had to follow it. Sarah stood there in the bathroom for a moment longer, taking a deep breath to steady herself. She couldn't afford to waste time. She had to act, had to follow the trail her children had left for her. With the note tightly clutched in her hand and the toy securely tucked under her arm, Sarah left the bathroom, her heart pounding with determination. This was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. As she walked out of the KFC, she felt a mixture of emotions: hope, fear, confusion, but also a renewed sense of purpose. For weeks, she had wandered through the days, unsure of what to do. But now she had a direction. Her children were telling her they were waiting for her, and she wasn't going to stop until she found them. Sarah took a deep breath as she stepped into the busy streets. The noise of the city surrounded her, but in that moment, all she could hear was the steady beat of her heart and the thought that kept repeating in her mind: "I'm going to find you, Mia and Max. I'm coming for you." With the note tightly clutched in her hand, Sarah felt a strange surge of determination. The message her children had left behind was simple but clear. "We're okay, Mommy. We're waiting for you." It was like a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of despair. It wasn't much, but it was everything she had been hoping for. Proof that her children were still alive, still out there somewhere, waiting for her to find them. But there were still so many questions. How had they gotten to the KFC? Why had they left the note in such a random place? And most importantly, where were they now? The urgency in Sarah's chest only grew. Her mind raced as she thought of where she should go next. She had to act quickly, but she had no idea where this new trail would lead. The message wasn't enough to give her clear answers, but it was enough to keep her moving forward. The street outside was busy, filled with people going about their daily routines. But to Sarah, everything felt different. She was no longer just walking aimlessly through the city, weighed down by hopelessness. She was walking with purpose now. Her children were out there, and she had to find them. The thought gave her a renewed sense of energy, though she couldn't ignore the nagging doubt that lingered in the back of her mind. What if this was some kind of cruel trick? What if the message wasn't really from Mia and Max? She shook the thought away. She couldn't afford to doubt now. She had to believe in this, in the small hope that had finally appeared. She had come this far. She couldn't turn back. As she walked, Sarah began to think about all the places she had already searched. She had checked hospitals, shelters, and even police stations. She had combed through every part of the city she could think of, following every lead, and yet nothing had brought her closer to her children. This new clue felt different, though. There was something about it that made her believe it was real. She looked down at the stuffed animal in her arms. The little red bow was familiar, something Mia had adored ever since she was little. Holding it brought a sense of warmth, like a small piece of her children was still with her. But it also reminded her how far away they were. Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone ringing. She jumped, her heart racing. It could be the police with some new information, or maybe someone had found her children. With trembling hands, she answered the call. "Hello." Sarah's voice shook as she spoke. "Hello, is this Sarah?" A voice on the other end was calm but firm. "This is Detective Larson. I've been working on your case. We found something that might help." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could this be the break she had been waiting for? "What did you find?" she asked, holding her breath. "We have a new lead," Detective Larson continued. "It's not much, but we found a camera footage showing 2 children matching your kid's description near the old warehouse district. We're sending an officer to check it out right now." The words hit Sarah like a wave of cold water. It wasn't the answer she had been hoping for, but it was a step in the right direction. A small one, but it was something. The detective continued to explain the details, but Sarah barely heard any of it. Her mind was already racing, planning her next move. She had to get to that warehouse district. She had to be there, just in case it was them. She thanked the detective, hanging up quickly. The weight of the moment hit her like a wave. She was closer now. She could feel it. The thought of seeing Mia and Max again was almost too much to bear. But Sarah knew she couldn't let herself falter. She had come too far to stop now. With a deep breath, she set off toward the warehouse district, her steps quickening. This could be it. This could finally be the breakthrough she had been praying for. As Sarah hurried through the busy streets toward the warehouse district, her mind raced with a mix of hope and fear. The detective's words still echoed in her head. "Children matching your kid's description, near the old warehouse district." It was a lead, just a small clue, but it was enough to fuel the fire that had been burning inside her for weeks. This could be the moment she had been waiting for. She had to trust that this was the breakthrough she needed. Her heart beat faster as she approached the area. The warehouse district was old and industrial, with empty buildings and narrow alleyways that felt cold and forgotten. It wasn't the kind of place anyone would expect to find children, especially not the ones she had been desperately searching for. But as she turned a corner and saw the large, looming warehouse up ahead, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was where she would find them. Every step she took felt heavier than the last, the weight of uncertainty pulling at her. What if this wasn't the right place? What if it was just another false lead? But no, she couldn't think that way anymore. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of optimism, a glimmer of belief that she was getting closer. She quickened her pace, moving through the area with purpose, her eyes scanning the surroundings. The streets were eerily quiet, the distant hum of city traffic barely audible. The warehouses were dark, their windows grimy and covered with layers of dust. Sarah felt a chill creep up her spine, but she pressed on. She had come too far to turn back now. As she reached the entrance to one of the warehouses, she noticed a flicker of movement inside. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it them? Her mind raced, but her feet kept moving. She approached the door cautiously, her breath shallow as she reached for the handle. Her fingers trembled as she touched the cold metal. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open slowly. The sound of creaking hinges filled the silence as Sarah stepped inside. The warehouse was dimly lit, with shadows stretching across the dusty floor. There were old crates stacked high and broken machinery scattered throughout the space. It smelled musty, like an abandoned building long forgotten. But as Sarah's eyes adjusted to the low light, she saw them. Mia and Max were sitting on the floor, huddled together, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. They looked tired and hungry, but they were safe. They were alive. Mia, Max. Sarah's voice broke as she rushed toward them, her legs trembling. The moment they saw her, their faces lit up with recognition. The bond between a mother and her children was undeniable, and in that moment, all the weeks of pain and fear melted away. "Mama," Max cried, his voice shaky, as he jumped up to run into her arms. Maya followed quickly, wrapping her small arms around her mother's waist. Sarah sank to her knees, holding both of them tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I found you," she whispered, as if saying the words out loud would make the reunion feel more real. "I finally found you." The children clung to her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah felt the weight lift from her chest. They were safe. They were together again. She couldn't believe it, couldn't fully process the joy that filled her heart. All the days of searching, all the doubts, all the pain, it had led her to this moment. Her family was whole again. But even in the relief of the reunion, questions still lingered. How had they ended up in this warehouse? Who had taken them? And why? Sarah would get those answers in time, but for now she focused on the most important thing. Her children were back in her arms. As she held them close, she made a silent promise to herself. No matter what it took, she would protect them, keep them safe, and never let them out of her sight again. As Sarah held Mia and Max in her arms, the relief was overwhelming. The pain of the past 6 weeks seemed to melt away in an instant. Her children were safe, they were healthy, and she had finally found them. But as she sat on the cold floor of the warehouse, the joy of the reunion was mixed with one lingering question. The homeless woman. The one who had told her to check the KFC bathroom. How had she known? Why had she pointed Sarah in that direction? The thought kept nagging at Sarah's mind. She had almost dismissed the advice as some strange coincidence, but now, knowing what had happened, she couldn't ignore it. Who was this woman? Was she just a random stranger, or was there something more to her? For a moment, Sarah looked around the warehouse, almost as if expecting the woman to appear. But there was no sign of her. She had given the advice and then disappeared, leaving Sarah to follow the trail. Sarah had tried to find her again, asking around the area and checking other places where she thought she might find the woman, but no one seemed to know who she was. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, just as mysteriously as she had appeared. The more Sarah thought about it, the more it seemed like something out of a story. How had the woman known exactly where to send her? The KFC bathroom had been a strange and random place, and yet it had led Sarah directly to her children. Was it just luck, or was there something more at play? As the days went by and Sarah began the process of getting Mia and Max back to a normal routine, she couldn't shake the sense that she had been guided in some way. The woman hadn't asked for anything in return. She hadn't even explained why she had given Sarah that advice. It was almost as if she had been there to help, and once her job was done, she simply disappeared. Despite the mystery, Sarah couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. If the woman had never spoken to her, if she hadn't pointed her to the KFC bathroom, would Sarah have ever found Mia and Max? She didn't think so. The pieces of the puzzle might never come together, but Sarah was starting to believe that the homeless woman had played an important role in this strange and miraculous reunion. One day, as Sarah sat with Mia and Max at the kitchen table, enjoying a quiet moment together, she made a promise to herself. She would never forget the kindness of that woman, no matter how strange the encounter had been. She had helped her in a way that no one else had. And for that, Sarah was forever thankful. As time passed, the memory of the homeless woman lingered in Sarah's mind. She couldn't explain what had happened, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that her family was together again. Whatever force had guided her, Whatever strange circumstances had brought them to this point, Sarah knew that the most important thing was the love she had for Mia and Max, and the deep, unbreakable bond they shared. And so, the mystery of the homeless woman remained just that, a mystery. But in Sarah's heart, there was peace. She had found her children, and that was all that mattered.